June 6, 1944, 5:52 a.m. Lieutenant Walter Olmsen raised his binoculars from Battery Krisbeck and watched his world end. The English Channel, Germany's shield for 5 years, had vanished, replaced by a horizon of steel stretching beyond sight. 7,000 ships, 195,000 sailors, 8 nations united in purpose. When his 210mm Skoda gun fired its first shell at 5:55 a.m., the round fell like a raindrop into an ocean. He whispered into the observation log, "They are unstoppable." The Third Reich had 4 hours left to believe otherwise. June 5, 1944, 11:47 p.m. "You're writing to her again." Walter Olmsen looked up from the steel desk. His executive officer, Friedrich Heise, stood in the doorway of the command bunker, rain dripping from his helmet. "Anna deserves to know I'm thinking of her." Olmsen folded the letter, even if she never reads it. That's cheerful. That's realistic. Olmsen tucked the envelope into his breast pocket next to the photograph Anna on their wedding day, 1936, her smile brighter than the Bremen summer sun. "How's the weather?" "Miserable. 40-kilometer winds. Rain like God's pissing on France." Heiss shook water from his coat. "No sane commander invades in this." Olmsen opened the battery logbook, black leather, 400 pages, half of them filled with his meticulous handwriting. Range calculations, weather patterns, firing solutions for every sector of the channel. He wrote the date and time. "Every night for 16 months I've written no enemy activity. Tonight feels different." "Different how?" "I don't know." Olmsen closed the book. "That's what worries me." The phone rang, harsh, metallic. Heise grabbed it. "Battery Krisbeck." "Yes." "What, say that again?" His face changed. "How many?" Olmsen was already standing. "What is it?" Heise covered the mouthpiece. "Hauptmann Wittersheim at W17. He says there are aircraft. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. He can hear the engines, but the clouds." Olmsen took the phone. "Wittersheim, this is Olmsen. Explain." The voice on the other end was tight, professional, scared. "Sir, the entire sky is vibrating. I've never heard so many engines. Whatever this is, it's massive. Bombers heading inland." "I don't think so, sir. The sound isn't moving. It's circling. It's Christ, there's something in the clouds." A pause. Then parachutes. "I see parachutes." Olmsen's hand tightened on the receiver. "How many?" "I can't dozens. No more. They're everywhere." "Sir, I think—" The line went dead. "Friedrich, wake everyone. Full battle stations." "Sir, it's probably just supplies blown off. Now." June 6, 1944, 1:33 a.m. The command post buzzed with voices. Phone calls from every observation post along the coast. Parachutes near Sainte-Mère-Église. Gliders crash landing in fields. Explosions at bridges. Something was happening, something coordinated, but the storm swallowed everything. Gunther Weber, 19 years old and 3 months out of training, stood at the door. "Sir, should we wake the gun crews?" "They're already awake, Weber. Get to gun 1. Check the hydraulics." "In this rain?" "You want to fire with broken equipment." Weber disappeared into the darkness. Olmsen stared at the map on the wall. Red marks showed German positions. Blue marks, Allied forces across the channel. 21 miles of water. 4 years that water had protected them. Tonight, something was crossing it. The phone rang again. Heiss answered, listened, then hung up without speaking. "Well, that was division headquarters." Heiss's voice was flat. "They say we're overreacting. Probably scattered drops blown off course by the wind. Maintain standard alert." "Standard alert?" Olmsen laughed a sound without humor. "Friedrich, every battery from Cherbourg to Caen is reporting parachutes and division wants standard alert." "Those are the orders, sir." "Then division is run by idiots." Olmsen grabbed his binoculars. "I'm going to the observation post." "Sir, it's pitch black. You won't see anything." "Then I'll listen." 4:47 a.m. Olmsen stood in the concrete tower 40 meters above the sea. Rain hammered the reinforced roof. Wind shrieked through the gun ports. Below the channel was invisible just blackness and the crash of waves against the cliffs. But he could hear it, beneath the storm, a low rumble, rhythmic, mechanical. Engines. "Sir." Weber's voice cracked as he climbed the ladder. "Sir, the storm's breaking." "What?" "Look east, the clouds they're lifting." Olmsen pressed his face against the observation slit. Nothing. Then a gap in the rain. A moment of clarity. And he saw it. Mein Gott. Ships. Dozens of them. No hundreds. Destroyers. Cruisers. Transports in formations so precise they looked painted on the water. And behind them more. And more. The horizon wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Completely full. "Friedrich!" Olmsen's voice was a roar. "Friedrich, get up here!" Heise took the ladder 3 rungs at a time. "What is—" He stopped, stared. "That's not possible. Count them." "I can't. There are too many." "Count them anyway." Heise raised his binoculars. His lips moved silently, then stopped. "Sir, I see at least 300 in my sector alone. If the entire invasion zone, thousands." Olmsen's hands were shaking. He gripped the binoculars tighter. They brought thousands of ships. Klaus Brenner, the rangefinder operator, appeared in the doorway. "Sir, Division is calling. They want to know Jesus Christ." He saw the channel. "Is that real?" "It's real." Olmsen turned to Heise. "Get Division on the phone. Tell them the invasion is here. Tell them it's everything. Tell them—" He stopped. What could he tell them? That the entire Allied war machine was sailing toward France. That the Atlantic Wall was about to be tested by an armada that shouldn't exist. Tell them we're engaging. 5:50 a.m. The 4 Škoda 210mm guns of Battery Krisbeck sat in reinforced bunkers, each barrel pointing toward the channel like accusing fingers. 42 men manned the battery. Most of them were farm boys and factory workers. 3 had combat experience. None had ever seen a fleet this size. Olmsen stood at Gun 1's firing station. "Range to lead battleship." 18,000 meters, sir." Brenner's voice was steady, professional. His hands weren't. Too far. The Škoda's maximum effective range was 17,000. Beyond that, accuracy dropped to prayer and luck. We wait. Olmsen watched the fleet through the gun port. They'll come closer. They have to come closer to support the landing. Certain. Weber stood at the ammunition hoist, his face pale. What if they don't come closer? What if they just... The world exploded. The Allied naval bombardment began with the subtlety of an earthquake. Orange flashes rippled along the battleship line. Olmsen counted 12, 15, 18 guns firing in sequence. Then the shells arrived. The beach fortifications disappeared in geysers of sand and concrete. Each explosion threw debris 300 meters into the air. The sound wasn't individual blasts anymore. It was one continuous roar, like God tearing the world apart. "They're hitting the beach," Heise shouted over the noise. "They're not aiming at us. Not yet." Olmsen's jaw ached from clenching. "They'll come for us when we fire." Brenner ranged to those destroyers. 13,500 meters. Good. Target the lead ship. Gun 1 load armor piercing. Prepare to fire on my command. The crew moved like they'd trained hydraulics, winding the 135-kilogram shell lifted from the magazine, the breech slamming shut. Weber stood at the firing lanyard, knuckles white. "Sir," Heise was beside him. "Once we fire, they'll know we're here. Every gun in that fleet will turn on us." "I know. Hey. We have maybe 40 shells per gun. They have thousands of ships." "I know. This is suicide." Olmsen looked at him. "What would you have me do, watch?" Heise said nothing. "Bearing 275, elevation 12 degrees. Olmsen's voice cut through the bombardment. "Fire!" The Škoda roared. The bunker shook. The shell left the barrel at 850 meters per second, climbing through the dawn light in a perfect arc. Through the binoculars, Olmsson watched the splash 60 meters short and to the left. Up 200 right, 50 fire again. The second round was closer. The third straddled the destroyer's bow. The fourth hit. Brenner screamed. Direct hit on the superstructure. Olmsson saw it, the flash of impact, the smoke pouring from the destroyer's forward section. Not a kill, but a wound. Proof they could hurt these steel monsters. Gun 2 engage that cruiser. Gun 3 target the transports. Make every shot. The destroyer returned fire. 5 shells. 5-inch naval guns probably. They hit the cliff face 200 meters east. Rock and dirt showered the battery. Close. Much too close. All guns rapid fire hit them before they bracket us. For the next 30 minutes, Battery Krisbeck fought alone against the invasion fleet. Gun 1 scored 2 more hits, one on a transport that forced her to turn away, smoking another on a destroyer's aft turret. Gun 3 straddled a cruiser. Gun 2's crew worked like machines, firing, reloading, firing again until the barrel glowed red in the dawn light. Gun 4 took a direct hit. Olmsson was at Gun 1 when he heard the explosion, different from the naval bombardment. Closer, sharper. He ran toward Gun 4's bunker. Smoke poured from the entrance. The steel door hung twisted on its hinges. Klaus! Klaus! A hand grabbed his shoulder. Heiss. Blood ran down the side of his face. Don't go in there. My men are... Your men are dead. Heiss's grip was iron. 6 of them. The shell punched through the ammunition bunker. There's nothing left to save. Another impact. The floor buckled. Olmsson staggered. Heise caught him. Sir, we need to get back to Gun 1. I'm going back to Gun 1. Olmsson pulled free. His hands were shaking. 6 men. He knew their names, knew their families. Weber's friend from training was in Gun 4. What was his name? Mueller. Franz Mueller. 19 years old. Sir, Weber was at Gun 1 wild-eyed. We're down to 20 rounds. What do we keep firing? Olmsson climbed back to the gun position. Every shell counts. Brenner ranged to that battleship. 16,000 meters. Finally within range. Target the battleship. Load armor piercing. We're going to hurt them. The Škoda spoke again. The shell climbed. Olmsson watched through the binoculars, watched it fall, watched it hit the battleship's forward turret and bounce off like a stone hitting steel. The armor's too thick, Heiss said quietly. Then we hit them somewhere else. Again, fire again. 7:15 a.m. The phone rang. Heiss answered, listened. His face went gray. That was Lieutenant Huller, Battery Hamburg. He says they're being engaged by rocket ships. Ships that fire thousands of rockets at once. He says his entire position is being buried. He says... Heiss's voice cracked. He says goodbye. Olmsson took the phone. Hans, can you hear me? Static. Then Huller's voice, distant, breaking up. Walter, it's too much. We can't... Tell Maria I... The line went dead. Olmsson stood there, receiver in hand, listening to emptiness. Hans Huller. They'd trained together in 1932, served together in Poland. Hans had a daughter, 7 years old. Maria wanted to be a teacher. Sir, Weber's voice was small. Gun 2 just lost hydraulics. We're down to Gun 1 and Gun 3. How much ammunition? 12 rounds. Total, 12 shells. Against 7,000 ships. The mathematics was absurd, obscene. Sir, Heisse stepped closer. Division is ordering all batteries to fight until overrun or ammunition is exhausted. No retreat, no surrender. Of course they are. Olmsson climbed to the observation post one last time. He had to see, had to understand. The channel was still full, more full than before. The landing craft were in the water now, hundreds of them, thousands heading toward Utah Beach like a migration of mechanical fish. Behind them, the transports. Behind them, the cruisers. Behind them, the battleships. And behind them, more ships. Always more ships. He pulled out the logbook, opened it to a fresh page, wrote carefully, precisely, June 6, 1944. 07:15 hours. Ammunition critical. Fleet continues to grow. Current estimate minimum 6,000 vessels, possibly 7,000. We are firing at an ocean. The ocean does not notice. Sir, Heiss read over his shoulder. 7,000, that's how many I count. Olmson's voice was flat, dead. The Kriegsmarine has maybe 200 ships total. They built 7,000. 7,000 Friedrich. Do you understand what that means? It means they had time. It means they had factories, shipyards, resources. It means while we were defending, they were building, and they built faster than we could destroy. Olmson closed the logbook, placed it in its protective case. We lost this war years ago. We just didn't know it until today. Don't talk like that. Why not? Because it's defeatist, because it's true. Olmson pointed at the channel. Look at them. Look. That's not an army, Friedrich. That's industrial capacity. That's democracy armed with factories. We prepared to fight soldiers. What came was something else, something new. Weber appeared at the ladder. Sir, we just fired our last armor-piercing round. All we have left is high explosive, 5 shells. 5 shells. Olmson almost laughed. Then we use them. Target those landing craft. Make them count. 9:30 a.m. Gun 1 fired its final round at 9:17 a.m. The shell arced toward a cluster of landing craft approaching Utah Beach. Olmson didn't see if it hit, didn't care anymore. Set demolitions. His voice was mechanical. We destroy what we can, then we fall back to the secondary line. The men moved slowly, exhausted. They placed explosive charges at the gun breaches and the ammunition bunkers along the observation post's support columns. 42 men had manned this battery at dawn. 31 remained. Olmson took the logbook from its case, opened it one last time, wrote, "We prepared to fight soldiers. What came was factories that could swim. Courage cannot defeat production. Will cannot sink steel. We watched the future destroy the past one shell at a time. Germany lost this war the day it declared war on nations that could outbuild us. Everything since has been epilogue." He signed it, dated it, placed it back in the case and sealed it. Someday someone would find this, would read it, would understand. "Sir, charges are set." Heiss stood at the entrance. "We're ready to evacuate." Olmson took one last look through the observation post. The sea was still covered in ships, still disgorging men and equipment, still functioning with mechanical efficiency. He thought of Anna. Wondered if Bremen was safe. Wondered if she'd gotten his letters. Wondered if she'd understand why he fought even when he knew it was hopeless. He pulled her photograph from his breast pocket. Her smile. That Bremen summer, before the war, before everything. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he turned and walked toward the ladder. Behind him, Weber hit the detonator. The explosions rippled through battery Krisbeck. Guns destroyed ammunition. Bunkers collapsed, the observation post cracking and tilting. 31 men walked away from the position they'd defended. Walked inland. Walked toward 2 more months of fighting in the Norman hedgerows. Olmson didn't look back. He knew what was behind him, the Atlantic Wall broken. The channel full of ships, the Third Reich dying one beach at a time. He knew something else too, something he couldn't say to his men, something he'd written in the logbook but couldn't speak aloud. They'd lost, not because they lacked courage, not because they didn't fight hard enough. They lost because the other side could build 7,000 ships and Germany couldn't. Because modern war wasn't won by warriors anymore, it was won by welders, shipwrights, factory workers, and the unglamorous arithmetic of industrial capacity. The Allies hadn't defeated them with tactics. They'd defeated them with patience production and the simple ability to turn raw materials into overwhelming force. On June 6, 1944, at Battery Krisbeck, Walter Olmson learned what his commanders refused to accept: courage was no longer enough. Walls were no longer enough. Belief was no longer enough. In modern war, logistics was destiny. And Germany's logistics had just run out. The sea had turned to steel, and steel had already won. The walk inland took 3 hours. 31 men, weapons, slung boots, heavy with Norman mud. Olmsson led them through fields where cows grazed as if the world weren't ending. Past farmhouses with shutters closed tight. Past a church where an old woman stood in the doorway watching them pass, her face empty of expression. No one spoke. What was there to say? At 1:45 p.m., they reached the secondary defensive line, a series of trenches and machine gun nests 2 kilometers from the coast. A lieutenant from the 709th Division met them, clipboard in hand, face too young for the responsibility in his eyes. Battery Krisbeck. What's left of it? Olmsson saluted mechanically. 31 men, 4 guns destroyed. We held for 4 hours. The lieutenant made a notation. Division wants you to reinforce the line here. The Americans are pushing inland faster than expected. How fast? They're already 3 kilometers from the beach. The lieutenant's voice cracked slightly. In 6 hours. Hayes stepped forward. That's impossible. The beach defenses should have held for days. The beach defenses are gone. The lieutenant looked at his clipboard as if the paper might offer answers. Naval bombardment destroyed most of them before the first soldier landed. The ones that survived. He stopped. Have you seen what they're bringing ashore? We saw the ships, Olmsson said quietly. Not just ships, tanks, hundreds of tanks, and trucks, more trucks than we have in the entire army group. They're unloading them directly onto the beach, some kind of floating pontoons. It's like they brought a port with them. Weber spoke up, his voice hoarse. How do we fight that? The lieutenant didn't answer. He just pointed toward the trench line. Take positions there. Wait for orders. Olmsson watched him walk away. 22 years old, maybe. Probably dead by tomorrow. They took positions in the trenches. The mud was knee-deep. No one had thought to bring food. Olmsson distributed what remained of the battery's iron rations, hard biscuits, ersatz coffee, cigarettes, for those who smoked. Weber didn't smoke. He sat with his rifle across his knees, staring at nothing. You did well today, Olmsson told him. 6 of our men are dead, and you're alive because you did your job. Olmsson sat beside him. The trench wall was cold against his back. That's all any of us can do. Is it enough? Olmsson thought of the 7,000 ships, the ocean of steel, the mathematical certainty of defeat. I don't know. By 4:00 p.m., they could hear the fighting small arms fire to the east, the heavier crump of tank guns, the occasional scream of artillery overhead. American artillery. You could tell by the volume. The Wehrmacht fired in precise, calculated salvos. The Americans just kept shooting round after round after round, as if ammunition were infinite. Maybe it was. Heiss crawled over, keeping low. I've been talking to the other units. They say the Americans landed 150,000 troops today, maybe more. In one day. Heiss's face was streaked with mud and exhaustion. And they're still coming. The radio intercepts say the ships are running a shuttle service, landing troops going back for more, landing again, like a bus route. Olmsson pulled out his logbook. The leather was damp. He wrote anyway. June 6, 1944, 1600 hours. Secondary line. Enemy landed 150,000 troops in first wave. Logistics operation on scale never before seen in warfare. This is not invasion. This is industrial process. What are you writing? The truth. Olmsson closed the book. Someone should record it. At 6:30 p.m., the first American patrol appeared. 6 men moving carefully through the hedgerows. They wore uniforms that looked new. Not the threadbare patched clothing of the Wehrmacht, but fresh olive drab, properly fitted with equipment that gleamed. Even their rifles looked different. Heavier, more solid. The German machine gunner opened fire. 2 Americans fell. The others scattered, taking cover, returning fire with a volume that made Olmsson's ears ring. Then came the mortars, rapid, accurate, walking up the trench line with mechanical precision. Pull back, someone screamed. Pull back to the next position. They ran. 31 men became 27 in the span of 3 minutes. Olmsson didn't see who died, didn't have time. They fell back 200 meters to another trench line, this one already occupied by a company from the 352nd Division. The company commander was a hop man, maybe 40 years old, with the look of a man who'd stopped believing in victory sometime around Stalingrad. "You're the coastal battery." "Yes, sir." "How bad is it?" Olmsson met his eyes. "We counted 7,000 ships, sir. Maybe more. We couldn't count them all." The hopman closed his eyes, opened them. 7,000. "Yes, sir." "And Division wants us to hold this line with 2 understrength companies and no armor support." "Yes, sir." The hopman laughed a sound like breaking glass. "Well, orders are orders." He turned to his men. "Dig in. If they want this field, they'll pay for it." But the Americans didn't pay. They simply called in naval gunfire. The first shells arrived at 7:15 p.m. Olmsson was filling canteens from a stream when the air began to scream. He dove flat. The ground erupted 50 meters away, then 30, then 10. Dirt and rocks rained down. Someone was screaming. Someone was always screaming. When it stopped, and it took 15 minutes to stop, the trench line was gone. Just gone. Erased. Replaced with overlapping craters, each one large enough to hide a truck. Brenner crawled out of a shell hole, blood running from his nose. That was from the ships. That was from the fleet. How can you tell? The size of the craters. Only naval guns make holes that big. He spat blood. They can hit us from 20 kilometers away. We can't even see them. The hopman emerged from what was left of his command post. Half his face was burned. "Fall back," he said calmly. "Fall back to the next line. Leave the wounded, we don't have time." "Sir, we can't just—" "Those are my orders, Oberleutnant. Follow them or I'll shoot you myself." They left 9 men behind. Olmsson could hear them calling as the company withdrew, calling for help, for water, for their mothers. By midnight, the calling had stopped. The night was chaos. American planes overhead dropping flares that turned night into day. Artillery falling constantly, not targeting specific positions, just blanketing entire areas with steel and high explosive. And through it all, the sound of engines, trucks, tanks, half-tracks, a mechanical symphony that never stopped, never paused, never gave them a moment to breathe. At 2:30 a.m., Olmsson's group linked up with the remnants of 3 other companies. Maybe 200 men, total exhausted, low on ammunition, commanded by a major who'd lost his left arm somewhere during the retreat. The major gathered the officers in a barn. Someone had lit a kerosene lamp. In the yellow light, their faces looked like skulls. "Gentlemen," the major said, "I'll be brief. We're ordered to hold this position until 0600, then fall back to the Carentan line. That gives us 3.5 hours. "What are we holding against?" someone asked. "The 4th Infantry Division, American. Approximately 22,000 men supported by armor and naval gunfire. We have 200 men and 12 machine guns. I'm aware of the mathematics." The major's voice was cold. "I'm also aware that our orders come from Divisional Command, which comes from Corps, which comes from Berlin. If you'd like to discuss the tactical situation with the Führer personally, I'm sure he'd be delighted to hear your opinion." No one laughed. "We hold for 3.5 hours. Then we retreat. Understood." They held for 2 hours and 17 minutes. The Americans came at 4:47 a.m. just as the sky was beginning to gray, but they didn't come like soldiers. They came like a factory production line, systematic, organized, overwhelming. First, the artillery barrage, 45 minutes of sustained fire that pulverized every building, every tree, every square meter of earth. Then the tanks grinding forward in a line, crushing hedgerows like they were made of paper. Then the infantry moving behind the tanks, using them as mobile cover. The German defenders fired everything they had. Machine guns, Panzerfausts, rifles. It didn't matter. For every American who fell, 5 more appeared. For every tank they knocked out, 3 more took its place. At 5:39 a.m., the major gave the order to retreat. Olmsson ran. They all ran. Through fields, through villages, through forests. The Americans pursued, but didn't press hard. They didn't need to. They had time. They had ammunition. They had the inevitability of mathematics on their side. By dawn on June 7th, Olmsson's group had been reduced to 19 men. They'd fallen back 12 kilometers from the coast. They'd lost contact with division. They had no food, minimal ammunition, and no clear orders beyond resist the enemy advance. They took shelter in a stone farmhouse. The owner was gone, fled, or dead. Olmsson didn't care which. His men collapsed on the floor, too exhausted to even remove their equipment. Weber sat against the wall, staring at his hands. They were shaking. "We can't stop them," he said. Not a question, a statement. "No," Olmsson said. "We can't." "Then why are we still fighting?" "Because we're soldiers. Because those are our orders. Because—" Olmsson stopped. Why were they fighting? For what? For Hitler's delusions. For a Reich that was already dead, that had died the moment those 7,000 ships appeared on the horizon. He pulled out Anna's photograph. The paper was water-stained now, her smile fading. "We fight because the alternative is giving up. And if we give up, we admit that everything, all the death, all the sacrifice was for nothing. Maybe it was for nothing. Maybe." Olmsson tucked the photo away. "But that's not for us to decide." At 9:00 a.m. they heard engines. American engines. They barricaded the farmhouse doors, prepared to make their stand. This was it. This was where it ended. But the engines passed by. The Americans weren't interested in one farmhouse with 19 German soldiers. They were heading inland, toward Cherbourg, toward the heart of France. The farmhouse wasn't strategically important. It was just an obstacle, and the Americans had learned not to waste time on obstacles. They simply went around. Heiss started laughing. Quiet at first, then louder, then uncontrollably. "They don't even care," he gasped. "They don't even care that we're here." And that was somehow worse than being attacked, being ignored, being irrelevant. Olmsson opened his logbook. The pages were damp, but he could still write. June 7th, 0900 hours. The Americans passed our position without engaging. We are no longer worth their ammunition. This is what defeat looks like, not death, but irrelevance. Through the farmhouse window, he could see the road. American trucks rolled past in an endless convoy, supplies, ammunition, reinforcements. He started counting but gave up after 50 vehicles. There were too many, always too many. Brenner joined him at the window. "Sir, I've been doing calculations. Based on what we've seen, the Americans are landing approximately 30,000 tons of supplies per day. That's more than the entire Wehrmacht receives for the Western Front. How is that possible? It's not possible. It shouldn't be possible." Brenner's voice was hollow. "But they're doing it anyway. They built floating harbors, sir, artificial ports right there in the ocean. I saw photographs in the intelligence briefing. Concrete sections, each one the size of a 5-story building. They towed them across the channel and assembled them like children's blocks." Olmsson thought of the Atlantic Wall. 5 years to build. Millions of cubic meters of concrete. Thousands of guns. The greatest defensive fortification in history. The Americans had bypassed it by bringing their own harbor. "We built walls," he said quietly. "They built ports. We prepared for the last war. They invented a new one." And that afternoon, a runner found them a corporal from division headquarters, face gray with exhaustion. He carried new orders. All units were to fall back to the Carentan-Isigny line. Form a new defensive position. Prepare for counterattack. "Counterattack with what?" Heiss demanded. "We have 19 men and maybe 400 rounds of ammunition total." The corporal shrugged. "Those are the orders, sir." So they retreated again. 19 men walking through a landscape that already felt foreign. American supply dumps appearing in fields. American MPs directing traffic at crossroads. American aircraft overhead every hour, undisturbed, unchallenged. At one point, they passed a column of American prisoners being marched toward the coast, maybe 40 men, hands on their heads, guarded by 3 German soldiers. The Americans looked better fed than their captors. Their uniforms were cleaner. Their boots were intact. One of them, a sergeant with a thick Brooklyn accent, called out, "Hey Fritz, war's over, buddy. You just don't know it yet." Weber raised his rifle. Olmsson pushed the barrel down. "Save your ammunition." "But he's right." Olmsen kept walking. The war is over. We're just still fighting it. By June 10th, Olmsen's command had grown to 43 men survivors from half a dozen different units, all mixed together, all equally lost. They held a position along the WWII River for 3 days, then fell back when American armor crossed upstream. They held another position in a village whose name Olmsen never learned, then fell back when naval gunfire reduced the village to rubble in 40 minutes. Each time they retreated, the American presence grew stronger. More troops, more vehicles, more supplies stacked in endless rows. And behind it all, visible from any high ground, the channel itself still full of ships, still disgorging men and equipment still functioning with the mechanical efficiency of an assembly line. On June 15th, Olmsen received orders to report to a command post 10 kilometers south. When he arrived, he found a staff meeting in progress. Colonels and generals, their uniforms still pressed, despite everything arguing over maps. A general with cold eyes turned to him. "You're the artillery officer who observed the initial landing." "Yes, sir." "Your report claimed 7,000 ships. Surely that's an exaggeration." Olmsen met his gaze. "Sir, if anything, it was an underestimate. I counted what I could see. There were more beyond the horizon." "That's impossible. No power on Earth can assemble that many vessels." "With respect, sir, they did. I watched them do it." The general's face darkened. "Your defeatism is noted, Oberleutnant. You're dismissed." Outside the command post, Heiss was waiting. "How did it go?" "They don't believe me." Olmsen lit a cigarette, his last one. "They think I exaggerated, that I panicked." "Did you show them the logbook?" "They didn't want to see it." Olmsen inhaled deeply, savoring the tobacco. "They don't want the truth. They want reassurance. They want to believe that if we just fight harder, hold longer, sacrifice more, we can somehow stop this. Can we?" "No." Olmsen ground out the cigarette. "We lost the moment we declared war on nations that could outbuild us. Everything since June 6th has just been counting the cost." That night, in a dugout that smelled of damp earth and desperation, Olmsen wrote his final logbook entry from Normandy, June 15, 1944. 10 days since the landing. We have fallen back 23 kilometers, casualties 60%, ammunition critical, morale broken. The Americans advance not through tactics, but through resources. They have more of everything, more men, more tanks, more shells, more food, more fuel. We fight with courage, they fight with capacity. And in modern war, capacity always wins. This is not a battle. It is an industrial process. We are not soldiers anymore. We are raw materials being fed into a machine that transforms blood into territory. The machine does not tire. The machine does not doubt. The machine simply continues, inevitable as mathematics, unstoppable as time itself. He closed the book. Outside, he could hear the rumble of engines. American engines, always American engines, the sound that never stopped. In the darkness, someone was praying. Someone else was crying. Weber appeared at the entrance, silhouetted against the night. "Sir, they're saying Rommel is coming, the Desert Fox himself. He'll turn this around. He always does." Olmsen looked at the young man's hopeful face and didn't have the heart to destroy it. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe he will."
Shia.
But in his pocket, Anna's photograph had dissolved into pulp. In his logbook, the truth was written in careful handwriting. And on the horizon, the sea was still full of ships, still feeding the machine that would grind the Wehrmacht into dust. Rommel arrived on June 17th. Not to Olmsen's sector, they were too far down the chain of command for that, but word spread fast through the shattered remains of the Wehrmacht. The Desert Fox had returned from leave. He'd inspected the front. He'd seen what they were facing. And according to the rumors, he'd wept. Olmsen didn't believe it at first. Rommel weeping. The man who'd chased the British across North Africa, who'd nearly taken Cairo, who'd become a legend for his tactical brilliance. But then a staff officer from Panzer Lehr Division arrived at their position. His face haunted and confirmed it. "I was there," the captain said. His name was Helmut Lang. He'd been Rommel's aide in Africa. We were in his car driving back from La Roche-Guyon. The field marshal was quiet the entire trip. Then about 10 kilometers from headquarters, he told the driver to stop. We pulled over near a hill overlooking the coast. He got out, took his binoculars, looked at the beaches for maybe 15 minutes. And, Heiss pressed. Lang's hands shook as he lit a cigarette. He lowered the binoculars, turned to me. His eyes were wet. He said, "Lang, we've lost. Not just the battle, the war. I've seen logistics before, but this is something new. They're not fighting us, they're processing us. And you cannot defeat a process with tactics." The words hung in the air, processing. Like they were raw materials, like the war had become an industrial operation. "What did you say?" Olmsson asked. "I didn't say anything. What could I say?" Lang inhaled deeply. On the drive back, he dictated a letter to von Klug. I wrote it down. He said the situation was hopeless, that we needed to seek peace terms immediately, that every day we continued fighting was murder, not warfare. Did he send it? Yes. Lang's laugh was bitter. Von Kluge sent it to Berlin. The response came back 2 days later. Continue fighting with fanatical determination. Signed by Hitler himself. Weber, who'd been listening silently, spoke up. "But Rommel's right, isn't he? We can't win this." "Of course he's right," Lang ground out his cigarette. "But rightness doesn't matter. Orders matter. Belief matters. The Führer's will matters. Facts." He spat. "Facts are defeatist." That conversation happened on June 19th. By June 20th, everything changed again. The storm came without warning, a summer tempest that turned the channel into a writhing beast. For 3 days, winds gusted to 70 kilometers per hour. Waves crashed against the Norman coast with enough force to shake the ground. And the Allied supply operation ground to a halt. For 72 hours, Olmsson's unit didn't hear American engines, didn't see American planes. The mechanical symphony that had been their constant companion since June 6th simply stopped. "This is it," Weber said, his face bright with hope. "This is our chance. The storm's destroying their floating harbors. The radio says one of them broke apart completely. They can't land supplies. We can counterattack." Brenner was less optimistic. "For 3 days, yes. Then what?" "The storm ends. The ships come back. The process continues. But 3 days without supplies, they'll be vulnerable." "Will they?" Olmsson had been studying the American positions through his binoculars. "Look at their dumps. Look at how much they stockpiled before the storm hit. They planned for this." He was right. When German reconnaissance patrols probed forward on June 21st expecting to find American units low on ammunition and food, they found supply depots still overflowing. Jerry cans of fuel stacked in pyramids 50 feet high. Ammunition crates arranged in rows that stretched for hundreds of meters. Food, real food, not the ersatz garbage the Wehrmacht survived on, piled in mountains. A sergeant from the 352nd Division came back from a patrol, shaking his head. "I counted the artillery shells in one dump, just one. I got to 12,000 before my officer ordered us back. 12,000 shells in one location, and I saw 5 more dumps just like it." "How?" someone asked. "The storm stopped their supply ships for 3 days." "That's the point," the sergeant said. "They brought so much in the first 2 weeks that 3 days without resupply doesn't matter. They overstocked. They planned for disruption. He stopped searching for words. They thought of everything. By June 23rd, the storm had passed. The ships returned. The mechanical symphony resumed louder than before, as if making up for lost time. And the German counterattack, the one Hitler had ordered, the one that was supposed to drive the Allies back into the sea, collapsed before it even began. Olmsson watched it happen from a forward observation post near St. Lo. The attack was scheduled for 5:30 hours on June 25th. 4 panzer divisions, the best Germany had left, would strike at the junction between the American and British forces, split the Allies, roll them up from the flanks, destroy their supply lines. On paper, it looked brilliant. In reality, it was a death sentence. The panzers assembled in the darkness of June 24th. Olmsen could hear them, the rumble of engines, the squeal of treads, the shouts of commanders positioning their vehicles. The plan called for 600 tanks. Intelligence reports suggested maybe 380 actually showed up. The others had broken down, run out of fuel, or been destroyed by air attacks during the approach march. At 05:20 hours, 10 minutes before the attack was scheduled to begin, the American artillery started. Olmsen had experienced American artillery before. This was different. This was coordinated fire from every gun within 30 kilometers, all firing simultaneously, all directed at the German assembly areas. The sound was continuous thunder. The earth shook like it was having a seizure. Flames rose into the pre-dawn sky. Through his binoculars, Olmsen watched panzer after panzer explode, not from direct hits, but from the sheer volume of fire saturating every square meter of ground. A Tiger tank, 56 tons of the most advanced armor in the world, took a direct hit from a 155mm shell and simply disintegrated. How did they know? Heise was beside him, shouting over the bombardment. How did they know exactly where we were assembling? Olmsen didn't answer. He was watching the sky. American reconnaissance planes circled overhead completely unmolested. The Luftwaffe was nowhere to be seen. The Americans could observe every German movement in real time, then call down artillery, with coordinates accurate to 10 meters. The counterattack lasted 47 minutes. By 06:17 hours, it was over. 200 German tanks destroyed or disabled. 3,000 casualties. The survivors retreated to their starting positions or tried to American fighter bombers, caught them in the open, adding to the slaughter. That afternoon, Olmsen was summoned to a divisional briefing. When he arrived, he found a room full of officers, all wearing the same expression of shell-shocked disbelief. The divisional commander, a colonel whose name Olmsen never learned, stood at a map board. His hand trembled as he pointed to positions. "Gentlemen, I'll be frank. The counterattack failed, completely. We lost 50% of our armor in less than 1 hour." "How?" someone demanded. "We had tactical surprise. We had nothing." The colonel's voice cracked. "They knew we were coming. Their reconnaissance flights spotted our assembly areas 2 days ago. They simply waited, positioned their artillery, and destroyed us before we could even engage." He paused. "Gentlemen, I've been a soldier for 23 years. I fought in the Great War. I thought I understood modern warfare. I was wrong. What the Allies are doing here isn't warfare as we know it. It's industrial management. They're applying factory efficiency to combat. And we were still fighting like it's 1918. An SS officer stood up, face red with anger. "This is defeatist talk. We need more determination, more willpower." "We need more tanks," the colonel shouted. "More fuel, more ammunition. We need air support. We need..." He stopped, sat down heavily. "We need what they have, and we don't have it. Germany doesn't have it. We lost the capacity war years ago. We're just paying the bill now." The room fell silent. Outside, the rumble of American trucks continued. Always the trucks, always the engines. The sound of industry grinding them into dust. Olmsen raised his hand. "Sir, may I ask a question?" "Go ahead, Oberleutnant." "The Americans, how much ammunition do they have?" "For their artillery, I mean." The colonel laughed, a sound without humor. "According to our intelligence, each American artillery battalion has enough ammunition stockpiled for 60 days of sustained combat operations. 60 days. Do you know how much a German artillery battalion has?" No one answered. 3 days, if we're lucky. We ration our shells like misers. They fire them like they have a factory attached to every gun. Because they do. They have factories back in America churning out shells 24 hours a day. We have factories being bombed into rubble. He stood. "This briefing is over. Return to your units. Hold your positions as long as possible. That's all we can do." As they filed out, Brenner caught up to Olmsen. His face was gray. "Sir, I did calculations last night based on what we've observed. And the Americans are landing 40,000 troops per day, every day, plus 6,000 vehicles, plus thousands of tons of supplies." Brenner's voice dropped to a whisper. "We're losing 2,000 men per day to casualties, but we're only receiving 300 replacements per day. Sir, the mathematics is clear. We're being bled white. In 60 days, there won't be enough Wehrmacht left in Normandy to hold a single village. 60 days. Olmsen did the math in his head. That's early August. Yes, sir. And then France falls. And then Germany falls. It's just arithmetic now. That night, Olmsen wrote in his logbook by candlelight. His hands were steady. The fear had burned out of him weeks ago, replaced by something colder. Acceptance, maybe. Or just exhaustion. June 25th, 1944. The counterattack failed. We threw our best remaining armor against their positions and achieved nothing except adding to the casualty lists. The problem is clear now. We are fighting a 20th century war with 19th century logistics. They have mechanized everything: supply, communication, fire support. We still rely on horses. 40% of our transport is horse-drawn. They have 650,000 trucks in theater. We have perhaps 20,000, and half of those don't run. This is not a battle of tactics. It is a battle of productive capacity. And productive capacity cannot be conjured from willpower or determination. It requires factories, resources, and time. We have none of those things. They have all of them. He closed the book. Outside, someone was singing a sad song about going home. Olmsen wondered if any of them would see home again. On June 29th, the Americans captured Cherbourg. The port city had been fortified for years, garrisoned by 21,000 troops, stocked with ammunition and supplies. The defenders were ordered to hold for months to deny the Allies a major port, to force them to continue relying on the vulnerable beach supply lines. It fell in 12 days. When the news reached Olmsen's position, Heise threw his map on the ground. 12 days. 12 days for a fortress that should have held until autumn. They used naval gunfire, a signals corporal explained. He'd intercepted American communications. Battleships. They parked offshore and fired 500 shells into the port defenses. Then they bombed it with 1,000 planes. Then they sent in the infantry. The garrison never had a chance. What about the port facilities? Olmsen asked. Did our engineers destroy them before surrendering? Completely. Every crane, every loading dock, every fuel dump demolished. The Americans will need months to repair it. Good. Heise picked up his map. At least we denied them something. The corporal's face went strange. Sir, that's the thing. The Americans don't seem to care. According to the intercepts, they're still landing 30,000 tons of supplies per day through the beaches. Cherbourg was just a bonus. They don't need it. They wanted it, but they don't need it. The implications sank in slowly. The entire German defensive strategy had been built on denying the Allies access to ports. Force them to supply over open beaches, make them vulnerable to weather and counterattack. But the Allies had simply solved the problem. They'd built their own harbors. They'd mechanized their beach operations to the point where they could sustain an army without a traditional port. They thought of everything, Weber said quietly. No, Olmsen corrected. They planned for everything. There's a difference. Thinking is strategy. Planning is logistics, and logistics wins wars. By July 3rd, Olmsen's unit had been reduced to 23 men. They'd been reinforced twice, losing the replacements as fast as they arrived. They held a position in the hedgerows south of Carentan, thick Norman bocage, perfect defensive terrain, except that the Americans had tanks equipped with hedge cutters devices that tore through the ancient bushes like paper. Nothing stopped them. When the Germans mined a road, the Americans brought in engineering units with mine detectors and cleared it in hours. When the Germans demolished a bridge, the Americans had portable bridges that could span a river in a day. When the Germans dug in, the Americans called in artillery or airstrikes, or simply bypassed the position and attacked from behind. It was like fighting a chess player who could make 3 moves for every one of yours. Eventually, inevitably, you lost. On July 7th, a staff officer arrived with new orders. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Maybe he hadn't. You're being transferred to the 352nd Division. They're forming a defensive line near St. Lo. You'll hold until... He stopped, looked at Olmsen. You'll hold as long as possible. How long is possible? Olmsen asked. I don't know. A week. 2 weeks until you run out of ammunition or men, whichever comes first. The officer's professionalism cracked. Look, I'll be honest. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. We've lost 80,000 men since June 6th. That's 4 full divisions. The Americans have landed 500,000 troops and they're still coming. Every intelligence report says they're preparing a major offensive. Something big. We think they're going to try to break out of the hedgerows, push into open country. Can we stop them? No. The word came out flat. Final. We can delay them, make them pay for every kilometer, but stop them, no. We don't have the resources. Heiss stepped forward. Then why are we still fighting? If we can't win, if it's just delaying the inevitable, why not? Because those are our orders. The staff officer's voice was ice. Because surrender is treason. Because if we stop fighting, everyone who died before us died for nothing. Take your pick. He left. The room stayed silent for a long time. Finally, Weber spoke. I had a letter from my mother last week, from Cologne. She said the city is being bombed every night. The factories are destroyed. The rail yards are gone. People are starving. He looked at his hands. She asked when I'm coming home. I didn't know what to tell her. Tell her the truth, Olmsson said quietly. What's the truth? That we're coming home when the war ends, and the war ends when we lose, and we lose when they've killed enough of us. Olmsson pulled out his logbook. The leather was falling apart now. The only question is, how many have to die before someone in Berlin accepts reality? On July 18th, the Americans launched Operation Cobra. Olmsson's unit wasn't directly in the path. They were positioned 5 kilometers east of the main assault, but they could see it, could hear it, could feel it in their bones. It began with the largest aerial bombardment in history, 1 to 500 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, 550 fighter bombers, 430 aircraft, total dropped 3,300 tons of explosives on a 5-kilometer wide section of the German line. The bombardment lasted 1 hour. Olmsson watched it from a church tower in St. Lo, watched the sky darken with planes, watched the earth below simply disappear beneath a blanket of explosions. Fire rose hundreds of meters into the air. The sound was beyond description, beyond noise, beyond thunder, beyond anything human language could capture. When it was over, the German defensive line in that sector had ceased to exist. 30,000 men dead wounded or so shell-shocked they could barely stand. The tanks, the guns, the fortifications all gone. Erased. Then the American armor came through. Not carefully, not probing for weaknesses. Just came through like water through a broken dam, spreading out into the French countryside at speeds no one thought possible. They broke us, Heiss whispered. They actually broke us. Olmsson didn't respond. He was writing in his logbook documenting what he'd witnessed, knowing that someday someone might want to understand how this happened. July 18th, 1944. Witnessed Operation Cobra. 300 tons of bombs in 1 hour. This is not close air support. This is not tactical bombing. This is the industrial capacity of an entire nation focused on a 5-kilometer target. The Americans did not outfight us. They did not outthink us. They simply outproduced us to the point where tactics became irrelevant. They turned warfare into a math problem. Apply enough force to any section of line and that section collapses. Then apply more force to the next section. Repeat until the enemy runs out of sections. Courage cannot solve this equation, neither can tactics. Only matching production can solve it, and we cannot match their production. We never could. By July 25th, American forces were pushing into open country. The hedgerow fighting was over. The breakthrough had succeeded, and the Wehrmacht in Normandy was disintegrating. Olmsson's unit retreated with everyone else, a chaotic mess of soldiers from a dozen different divisions, all mixed together, all falling back toward Paris. They fought delaying actions, set up positions, fired until the Americans brought up artillery, then retreated again, over and over. On August 2nd, they got trapped. The Americans had moved faster than anyone expected, cutting off the road to Paris. Olmsson's unit, along with maybe 50,000 other German soldiers, found themselves in a pocket near Falaise, surrounded, cut off. with American and British forces closing in from all sides. The orders from Berlin were clear: breakout. Fight through. Escape at all costs. But the reality was different. The reality was that they were trapped in a killing zone with Allied artillery raining down constantly and fighter bombers attacking anything that moved. Olmsen stood on a hill overlooking the pocket. Below, he could see German soldiers trying to organize defenses, trying to find a way out. But there was no way out. The pocket was tightening. The artillery was getting more accurate. The end was approaching with mathematical certainty. "Sir," Brenner approached, his uniform torn, his face covered in soot. "I've been talking to other units. Everyone's saying the same thing. We have maybe 2 days before the pocket closes completely. After that..." He didn't finish. "After that, we're prisoners or corpses." Olmsen completed the thought. "How many men are trapped here?" "Estimates vary. 50,000, maybe more." 50,000. An entire army, about to be destroyed not through superior tactics, but through superior logistics, superior coordination, superior industrial capacity. The Americans had simply moved faster, supplied, better coordinated, more effectively. They'd turned war into a business operation, and the Wehrmacht was being liquidated like a failed company. That night, as artillery fell like rain and fires burned across the pocket, Olmsen wrote his final entry in the logbook. August 2nd, 1944. Trapped in Falaise pocket. 50,000 men. No escape. The Americans did not defeat us through courage or tactics. They defeated us through organization, through planning, through the ability to coordinate 500,000 men and 100,000 vehicles across a front hundreds of kilometers wide. This is modern warfare. This is industrial warfare. Individual bravery means nothing. Unit cohesion means nothing. What matters is supply lines coordination and the capacity to replace losses faster than the enemy can inflict them. Germany never had that capacity. We were doomed from the moment we challenged nations that could outbuild us. Everything since has been epilogue written in blood. He closed the logbook for the last time. Around him, men prepared for the breakout attempt that everyone knew would fail. Weber cleaned his rifle. Heiss studied a map by flashlight. Brenner calculated firing solutions for battles they'd never fight. And in the distance, always in the distance, the sound of engines. American engines. The mechanical heartbeat of an industrial democracy that had learned to turn factories into weapons more devastating than any bomb. The sea had turned to steel on June 6th. Now, 2 months later, that steel was crushing everything in its path. Not through hatred or ideology, but through simple, relentless arithmetic. Through the unglamorous mathematics of production logistics and capacity. In the darkness of the Falaise pocket, surrounded by the wreckage of the Wehrmacht, Olmsen finally understood what Rommel had seen. What had made the Desert Fox weep. They weren't just losing a battle. They were witnessing the death of warfare as they knew it, the end of the age when tactics and courage could overcome material disadvantage. The future belonged to the side that could build more supply better and coordinate faster, and Germany was not that side, would never be that side again. The breakout began at 200 hours on August 3rd. 50,000 men, what remained of 7 divisions, tried to punch through the American lines under cover of darkness. They had no air support, no artillery preparation, just desperation and the knowledge that staying meant death. Olmsen led his 23 men south, following a column of Panzer grenadiers who claimed to know a gap in the American positions. The night was moonless. They moved through fields and forests, trying to stay quiet, knowing that American listening posts were everywhere. At 02:47 hours, the Americans opened fire. Flares shot into the sky, turning night into day. Machine guns opened up from positions no one had spotted. Artillery began falling with the precision that came from pre-registered coordinates. The German column disintegrated. "Off the road," Olmsen screamed. "Into the trees." They ran. Bullets cracked past. Men fell. Olmsen didn't look back. Couldn't look back. He just ran, crashing through underbrush, his lungs burning, his heart hammering. He ended up in a ditch with Heise Weber and 3 others he didn't recognize. Behind them, the killing continued. Screams, explosions, the chatter of machine guns. "We can't stay here," Heise gasped. "We can't go back," Weber added. "So we go forward." Olmsson checked his ammunition. 4 rounds left in his rifle, 1 magazine for his pistol. "We move quiet, we move fast, and we don't stop until we're through their lines." They moved east away from the main American positions, hoping to find a seam in the encirclement. For 2 hours, they crawled through fields, hid in ditches, froze when American patrols passed. At one point, they were so close to an American position that Olmsson could hear the soldiers talking, complaining about the coffee, about the rain, about wanting to go home. The Americans wanted to go home. The thought was almost funny. Everyone wanted to go home, but only one side had the industrial capacity to actually get there. Dawn found them 6 kilometers from where they'd started, still inside the pocket. American forces were tightening the noose. Artillery fell constantly now, methodical, walking across every sector of the pocket in a grid pattern. Nowhere was safe. They took shelter in a barn. The farmer was long gone. The animals, too. Just empty stalls and the smell of old hay. "Sir, we need a plan." Heise's voice was hoarse. "We can't just wander around hoping to find a way out." Olmsson pulled out his map. It was outdated, the positions marked on it meaningless now. "The Americans are here, here, and here," he pointed. "British forces are closing from the north, Canadians from the east. We're in a box 20 kilometers wide, getting smaller every hour. So what do? We wait until dark, try again, keep trying until we get through, or..." He didn't finish. "Or we surrender," Weber said quietly. The word hung in the air. Surrender, treason, cowardice. Everything they'd been taught to despise. But also survival. Also going home. Also seeing mothers and wives and a life after this nightmare. "I'm not surrendering," one of the other soldiers said.